Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, Curbing Crime with Employment, Seeing the Person Behind the Criminal Record. My name is Daniel Pruselides, and I am glad to be serving as your moderator for this webinar. I'll start off with a brief introduction of Cardus and some of our work before introducing our topic and getting into the meat of the discussion with Renze Nauta and our special guest, Stacey Palmer from Prison Fellowship Canada. So Cardus is a think tank. We deal with public policy and the world of ideas. We use standard social scientific methods. Our research reports go through a peer review process with outside experts. And we're based in two cities, Hamilton and Ottawa, Ontario. But we have at least three distinctives. First, we're rooted in the Christian social thought tradition as it has developed over the centuries. So like all think tanks, we operate out of a particular understanding of the world. In our case, that means some of our core themes include the belief that all human beings are made in the image of God and are worthy of dignity, freedom, and justice, and that the poor and disadvantaged deserve special attention, that government has an important but limited function, which includes enabling other civil society institutions to thrive. We seek the good of all people, regardless of their religious faith or lack of it. Secondly, we're nonpartisan. That means we do not advocate for any political party or candidate. We also share our work with everyone equally, and we seek to collaborate with anyone of goodwill. Thirdly, we have a hopeful vision of people, institutions, and governments working together for the common good. So we try to clarify and strengthen the work of society's institutions, and that includes the voluntary sector, the family, schools, workplaces, unions, faith communities, for example. Well, today's webinar falls under our Work in Economics research program. In the simplest terms, this program promotes a view of the economy that's more than just dollars and cents. People and the institutions they build are at the center. One of the key principles that motivates the work we're talking about today is that human persons have dignity that must be safeguarded in economic markets. And that includes the dignity of work. We believe that Canadian society should promote access to the labor market, particularly for the most disadvantaged among us. Now, speaking of the disadvantaged, as you'll likely know, around 4 million Canadians have a criminal record. Cardus research has shown that having a good job is an important part of helping these Canadians reestablish their lives and stay away from crime once they are out of prison. Unfortunately, having a criminal record makes it very difficult for a person to find a good job. Part of the problem is that the criminal record only tells part of someone's story. It can obscure the human person who is the subject of that criminal record. So Cardus has proposed specific, actionable policies that would help people with criminal records find work. And to help us learn more about that, we'll turn to Renze Nauta, who is Program Director for Work in Economics here at Cardus, and he has spearheaded our work in this area. So, Renze, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Daniel. I'm very glad that we're doing this webinar. This webinar is the most recent culmination, I guess, of a number of research reports that Cardus, that my program, Work in Economics, has done on this topic. It's a relatively recent addition to the Cardus repertoire of research, in that we only started researching it about 3 years ago, but it is something that flows directly from a long legacy of work that we've done on the dignity of labor and the dignity of work and the benefits that come from work. Maybe I'll ask. I have a couple slides that maybe I'll just ask to put up right now. And we're going to go through them. What I hope to do is go through some of the research that we've done and share with you some of our findings over the last 3 years that we've come to develop a deeper understanding of the relationship between crime and employment. And there's some very interesting pieces of data that I hope you'll find interesting. But let me start a little bit with the motivation for taking on this research in the first place. As I said, as Daniel very nicely summarized, one of the cornerstones of Cardus research is our belief in the dignity of every human person. I think one of the problems, though, is that for people with criminal records, it can be difficult for people to see that sometimes. And yet we take this as a foundation of our work and a foundation of how we believe that we should be treating people in society, including including those who are in prison and who are coming out of it. Another motivation that came from this is that is in looking at how criminal justice issues have been taken up by the political and policy discourse. I think sometimes there needs to be a rebalancing of this. I think both the left and the right in Canada and elsewhere can have can sometimes need a bit of a correction sometimes, and this is part of our attempt to do that. I also believe that the Christian social tradition, as Daniel laid it out, brings a unique understanding of some principles that come to bear on this issue. And I'm thinking of principles like justice and mercy and forgiveness and reconciliation. And these are principles that have a very strong resonance in our tradition and beyond, but certainly in our tradition. And I think that tradition can help to clarify some of the issues around criminal records and around employment and the dignity of work. The question for us is then how can we use these concepts to through our public policy system to promote these concepts, promote these principles, and apply them to public policy. And specifically for the Work and Economics program, we're interested in how this applies in labor markets and in employment, and how employment can help these people reestablish their lives on a social foundation. So as I said, this flows out of Cardus's research on the dignity of work. And so on the next slide, we have a little summary of a way we like to summarize the dignity of work. It does not capture the entirety of the dignity of work. Let me just say that. This concept has a very long history, but we do like to say that work is about more than money. Of course, work has a component of financial remuneration. You know, when we go to our job, we do expect to be compensated with a paycheck or with wages, and that is right and just. But there is a much deeper understanding of what work is. And much more fundamentally than just receiving a paycheck, work is also about recognizing that every person, regardless of where they've come from or what their characteristics might be or what they've done in the past, everyone has a talent or a gift or something unique that they can offer. And work and labor is a way of putting that gift at the service of others. And that's our starting point when it comes to the dignity of work. It's to recognize this basic human fact. We also, from there, believe that work contributes in a very specific way to human flourishing. And connected to that is that when we work, we're connected to a community in a different way. We're connected to community in many different ways, through the family or through schools or through other social institutions. But we have to recognize that in the workplace, we are connected to the community of the workplace. We have shown research at Cardus that demonstrates that having a job is associated with better physical and mental health. It is associated with stronger marriages and better family relationships. Our research has shown that people who have a job are less likely to do drugs or to commit crime or even other social issues like commit suicide and things like this. In other words, employment has this very significant impact, this significant positive impact on people's lives outside of the workplace. The question I think that this series of research is trying to accomplish is to connect that research that we've done on the dignity of work to this question about people who are coming out of prison or people who have been connected to the justice system in some way. So where I'd like to go with this, with the rest of this presentation, is to take a look at 4 reports that Cardus has done. I'm just going to give a very high-level overview of each one of them, and to take you through them and just share with a little bit of the research findings that we've come across, some of the little interesting tidbits. I'm only going to scratch the surface, so I do encourage you, if this interests you, to take a look at the research. All of our research is available at our website, which is cardus.ca. You can click on Work in Economics and take a look at every single one of our research reports. And we've learned a lot. I think it's fair to say that over the last 3 years of delving into this topic, we've learned a lot. I've certainly learned a lot. And my goal here is to just share a little bit of that with you, and then I hope you take it from there. So I'll start with the first report, which we published just a little over 2 years ago, Curbing Crime with Employment. This report was our first attempt to summarize what the academic research knows about the relationship between crime and unemployment. We're trying to capture what's known about this topic, and that was our to prepare a foundation for our own research on the topic. And it confirms what you would expect. That having a job reduces recidivism, or put another way, having a job reduces the likelihood that someone will commit another crime or a crime in the first place. There are some nuances, as there always are. For example, it depends on the type of crime that we're talking about. It depends on the age of the employee in this case. But as a general rule, it's pretty safe to say that having a job reduces crime. The more interesting question is why. And there are many theories out there, and you know, I've put three up on the screen, but you can see in the research there's a lot more. But to go over some of them, there are economic reasons why this is the case. Having a job provides somebody an income, and prison unfortunately deprives that person of that income. But also in a more positive way, having a job provides the means to help someone live, so that they hopefully don't have to rely on crime. That's the first theory. Another one, though, which is I find quite interesting, is this one about social bonds. It recognizes that, again, resonant with the Christian social thought tradition, but it recognizes that there are social bonds that are created in the workplace that are helpful to people. You know, getting up and having to go to a job every day creates positive social bonds that help and support people as they're coming out of prison, or to stop them from entering a life of crime in the first place. The other one, the third one on self-control, is just recognizing that sometimes there are some similarities between what might lead someone to crime and what might lead someone to unemployment, and that's a lack of self-control. I don't mean to suggest that any one of these theories is uniquely correct, but I do think, as you would expect in most cases, the truth is probably lies in a synthesis of many of these ideas, and that's more or less the framework that we've used at Cardus, recognizing that each one of these has something interesting to say about the human condition as it relates to crime and unemployment. I do want to come back to the data for a second, though, and I said earlier that it depends on age. And there's a unique aspect of this that points to the importance of family and social support in addition to having a job. It is true that having a job reduces recidivism, with one exception, and that is for adolescents. There's research out there that says that for an adolescent that has a job at more than 20 hours a week, that actually is associated with more crime. And there is a researcher who suggested that the reason for this probably lies in the fact that someone who is working more than 20 hours a week during their teenage years might suggest that there's either a problem at home, or maybe it's taking them away from their family life. What I think this shows is that, as important as having a job is, there are more fundamental and more important things that can really help people stay away from crime, and that's, for example, having strong family bonds. So I did want to say that because I think one of the important things about this is to recognize that there are other factors at play. The next report is called Humanizing Criminal Records. I'm going to get into a little bit more of the details of this in the discussion section. So I'm just going to introduce it. The basic idea here is to reform criminal records to better reflect the human person. We wrote this report in response to an idea that is coming out of the United States called Ban the Box. It's referring to the checkbox that's on application forms indicating whether you have a criminal record. And this is a tool that employers use to weed out applicants. And it has a lot of intuitive sense, and I think there's definitely something here to think about. That said, there is some research from some American social scientists that suggest that there are some problematic outcomes, and specifically what they found is that in some jurisdictions that have implemented this ban from employers asking about criminal records, it has led to some employers actually using racial characteristics as a proxy for criminal records. So, you know, and this is based on a perception that some employers have that there's a correlation between those two factors. I don't think we should dismiss this idea entirely, but I do think we should take some of these cautions with some seriousness. And that is what leads to our solution, which again, I'm going to get into the details later, but there is economic theory that suggests that labor markets, as all markets, but labor markets included, work better when there is more information flow, when there is better information flow. So that's our solution, is rather than restricting the amount of information, but rather we should be increasing the amount of information that's flowing to employers. So again, I'll get into the details of that in a bit. I'll move to the third report. This report, I think the previous report, Humanizing Criminal Records, is an attempt to change hearts and minds. It's an attempt to, and you'll see that in a bit, but it's an attempt to convince employers that people with criminal records are worth hiring. And it's worthwhile to them, and it's also worthwhile to the individual applicant. But sometimes you can't rely on that. Sometimes you can't rely on changing hearts and minds because it is a very slow process. It's not perfect. And sometimes governments need to incentivize behaviors to achieve a better social outcome. And that's the purpose of this report. We propose an idea from the United States federal government that's been in place for decades. And it provides insurance to employers. Employers who hire people with criminal records or who have drug addictions or who are otherwise have difficulty getting into the labor market. And what they do is they protect the employer against crimes of fraud or theft or other dishonest acts. And they provide $5,000 of coverage at a very low price. It's $100 US per bond, so it's about $140 Canadian these days. What it does is it places these people. It gives the employer a little bit of assurance that they're not going to be worse off from hiring someone. Again, it doesn't address necessarily directly the perspectives of employers, but addresses their economic behavior. And I think one thing that this policy shows is that you don't necessarily need to spend a ton of taxpayer money to accomplish a good social outcome. In this case, a mere $800,000 from the federal government or from, it could be done by any government, but a mere $800,000 could support 6,000 people and their reentry into the workforce, which if you take a look at other government programs, this is a bargain. And so it's a small program, but I think it would go a long way. And so we have many policy details. So if there are any lawmakers out there, I suggest you take a look at this report. There's a roadmap in this one with extensive policy details to implementing a policy like this in Canada. The final report that we have published so far, we hope to do more, but the final report that we published so far at Cardus Work and Economics on this topic is this one, Employing Ontarians with Criminal Records. It was written in conjunction with the Ontario 360 program at the University of Toronto. And this was our attempt to kind of bring all of these policies together and put together a bit of a policy agenda. I won't go into all the details because it does repeat some of the policies that I've already talked about and that we will be talking about in the discussion. I will mention one, which is a wage subsidy that we propose, and also active communication by policymakers to promote these policies and to break down some of the stereotypes or some of the misperceptions that exist among employers. But I think the main point of this report is to say that none of the policies that we have proposed in this report or in the previous reports I've just described, none of these policies we would see as a silver bullet. None of these policies on their own is going to solve what is a very complex problem in our labor market for people with criminal records. It is in the combination of all of these things, all of these policies working together and supplementing and supporting each other and beyond. Certainly, there are more policies to consider, but it is in the working together of these policies that we hope to achieve some changes in how we see this very vulnerable population that we would like to see placed in jobs. These are people who have paid their debt to society. It is in the interest of all of us. It is in their interest and in the interest of employers, and it's in the interest of society at large that these people have an opportunity to reintegrate their lives into society and find a way to contribute to that society that supports their dignity of work. Those are the 4 reports that we've done so far. We hope to do more. So I know we're going to enter into the conversation right now, and there's going to be an opportunity for questions and comments. If you don't get your question or comment in today, please feel free to email me. I'd love to hear people's stories. I'd love to hear people's thoughts. And if you have any specific policy ideas, I'd love to hear them as well. We're very much into discussion and conversation here at Cardus. And with that in mind, I'm going to turn it back to Daniel Pruselides right now.
Yeah, Renze's not kidding. We are into the conversation here at Cardus. Thank you very much for that, Renze. That was very insightful, and it sets a good basis for the conversation we're going to have now with Stacey Palmer from Prison Fellowship Canada. You are CEO and president of that organization. You have a long history of leadership and volunteering in the correctional system. So thank you so much for joining us. It's our privilege really to have you here and to hear your thoughts on all of this in conversation with Renze, of course. And I do want to just outline for our audience that we really do want your questions, and there will be some time before we're done this afternoon to take questions directly to Renze and to Stacey. So on your screen somewhere, you're going to see at the bottom a button that says Q&A. That's the button that you press in order to submit a question. Please don't use the chat because that's not going to work. But if you use the Q&A button, you can submit your question there, and we'll be able to see those, and Renze and Stacey will be able to field some of them. So if you've got questions that come up, or maybe you've had some that have already come up in just hearing Renze's presentation, go ahead and submit those as we speak. Stacey, I want to start with you with a question right off the top, just asking about the concept of justice. That's central to our discussion this afternoon, and its connection to human dignity. In your work and in your years of working in the correctional system, how do you see the human person in the correctional system, and what do you think that our audience needs to know about that?
Great question, Daniel, and thanks very much for having me. And Renze, great to be here with you in discussion as well. It's a fantastic question, Daniel, and really important to us, because you have to, if you're going to be involved in this kind of work, you have to have something that really anchors you. And like Cardus, we are a Christian organization, and so a lot of our thought comes from that area. And when I think about, well, why would someone do prison ministry, and why do we care about these individuals once a crime has been committed and people have been harmed? And there's a number of different places where I could go with that, but I'm gonna just quickly say that some of the work that anchors us there is in the book of Amos, this obscure little book of one of the minor prophets, we see the first human trafficker is recorded, and it's the king of Edom, and he human traffics an entire community of people. And they cry out to God, and they're praying to be released, and God God speaks to them, and God tells them how they're going to overthrow this king of Edom, and they do. So they listen, and they carry this out. But then there's this tragic little line where it says, "And then they burned his bones to lie." Lie, of course, is used to, this is kind of graphic, but so is the subject that we're dealing with. It removes fingerprints, it removes identity. And so, but then we see God turns, and now the very people that he freed, he's angry with. And you think, well, why is that? And as you study on, and if you want to study it, you can study it through Amos 1 and 2. But the answer is because we don't have the right to remove the dignity of another human being. We do have the right to be pro-social, and to carry out public safety and to be protected. And through that story, you see that. But we do not have the right. We are not God, and we do not have the right to remove the dignity of another human being.
And it's interesting that you put that as the anchor of your work, because as you're coming into contact with people who are behind bars, and some of them are behind bars for very serious reasons, I'm sure it's challenging to see the valuable person that's there.
Absolutely. And in that thought, our understanding at Prison Fellowship is that, we are all made in the image of God, and sometimes that image gets very marred and very distorted. And so then what are the programs, and as human beings, how can we be co-laborers in re-engraving that intended image, if you will, and helping a person sort back to the human flourishing that was intended for them and for those who are around them.
All right. Well, let's talk about at least one of those policies right now. I'll put a question to you, Renze, and then Stacey, I'd love to get your reaction to it. Renze, during your presentation, you talked about humanizing criminal records. You spoke a little bit about it. We keep talking about the human behind the criminal record, or the human in the correctional system. Well, can you unpack that a little bit for us? What do you mean when you say humanizing criminal records?
Yeah, thank you, Daniel. And I really appreciate what Stacey is saying, and because it gets at the heart, I think, of what the policy that we're talking about is trying to do. This humanizing criminal records idea. Let me start with what a criminal record is. I'm just going to lay that out. I mean, it's a criminal record. There are different forms of it, and you can find all the details in our report. But fundamentally, an employer can receive a list of a job applicant's, a list of their arrests, their convictions, and their sentences, and you can see it all laid out in black and white. It's quite detailed, but it's very one-sided, and I think that's a fundamental thing to recognize. I don't think we're at Cardus, we're not trying to say that these things don't matter. That's not at all what we're trying to say. They are part of someone's history, but I think what we have to recognize is that it is a portion of someone's history, and of someone's humanity. So if now I sometimes like to give the analogy of a general ledger of a corporation. I hate to reduce human persons to numbers and to accounting terms, but I think it's a useful analogy, because when you look at the health of a corporation, or when you look at the health of a human person, you're always looking at two sides. You're looking at debits and you're looking at credits. The problem with a criminal record, one of the problems with a criminal record, as I see it, is that it is just the debit side of of someone's relationship with the criminal justice system. The human person is far more complex, and that would be fine if employers and other people in society recognized that this is just one side of someone's of a human person. But we have a lot of data that show that it's not the case. There's lots of data to show that that employers are rightly concerned about someone's criminal record, but they tend to exaggerate the fear associated with it. So, for example, there was a survey done by the John Howard Society of Ontario of employers, and a significant number, 15% of them, said that they wouldn't even consider hiring someone if they knew that they had a criminal record at all. It didn't matter how long ago it was. It didn't matter what the crime was, but regardless of what it was, they would veto the application, which I think is putting too much emphasis on that debit side of the general ledger, if I can call it that. I'm getting to the policy, very, very quickly here, or not very quickly, perhaps. But the purpose, that insight, I think, is fundamental to recognizing what criminal records could be, because the criminal records, the list of arrests, convictions, and sentences doesn't even just capture capture let alone the capturing the totality of the person. It doesn't even capture the totality of the relationship to the criminal justice system, because when someone goes to prison, or even if they don't, there's a record of behavior that's associated with them, and it could be a very good record of behavior. There are opportunities in prison to learn a new skill, to receive training. There are work placement programs, and there's drug treatment available. There is spiritual counseling that's available to them. There are positive sides of a person's relationship with the criminal justice that can be told. So the policy that we've proposed is to include, subject to privacy requirements, but if someone wants to disclose this information, that information be included directly on the criminal record. It would provide employers an opportunity to see this other side, and my hope is that over time it would relativize a little bit the importance of a criminal record. Again, it's not to say that this information should be completely suppressed, or that this information has no bearing on a person's ability to do a job or ability to carry out a certain task. That's understandable, but the importance is relativizing that information and putting it into proper proportion.
Well, yeah, and I can imagine that there are particular types of work or particular workplaces where having a criminal record is more relevant than in other places, or it could be a workplace where you're dealing with children. There's all kinds of sensitivities in those contexts. But Stacey, I wonder what you think of that idea, having seen what happens behind bars.
I highly support that kind of a policy, and would love to see it go forward. And Renze would be happy to help you make it go forward. So maybe that's a conversation for after the webinar. But it's so true, and I think we have to look at. I hear the comment that there are a great number of people who say they would never hire somebody with a criminal record, and I understand that. But having worked and understood the context and seen this, I think there is an exaggerated fear that we tend to have as soon as we find out somebody has a criminal record. I did have a business that I owned prior to coming to Prison Fellowship, and I had 5 individuals with criminal records out of a staff of 48 who did have criminal records, and they were some of my best workers. I agree with you, Daniel. I mean, I'm not going to hire somebody who has a long history of fraud to do my bookkeeping, but the context is really important, and being able to look at what somebody has done since to participate in their own rehabilitation. And I think that's a really important factor. It's not just what you're conscripted to do for rehabilitation, but what did you choose to do? And what are as an employer, I would want to know, and I would take a genuine look at someone who's tried to make a genuine effort. And we have stories of many individuals who have who've gone on to employment and who did work at their rehabilitation and have fantastic stories.
Well, that's a great segue for my next question, which is, can you tell us one or two stories of people who have emerged from prison and really have turned their lives around?
Yeah. So we had this great opportunity that we got to work with the Skills Development Fund a couple of years ago, and through that fund we worked with uh, public safety and a number of different individuals, and decided that we would take on 100 individuals who wanted to work at their own rehabilitation, but work toward getting back to work. And what a great experience that was, to show us, the barriers that many people face. So we had people that were coming out that had worked on their rehabilitation, that were genuinely and earnestly seeking to do better and to not return to the life that they had come from. And we had individuals who they could get a job. They had been given a job, but they couldn't afford the first two. They couldn't afford to get off ODSP and wait the first 2 weeks to get a payroll, because you're paid in arrears, of course. And then they'd have this 2-week gap and they'd lose their apartment or they'd lose their housing. And so we learned all kinds of things where you could step in and give these different supports. Sometimes it was transportation, sometimes it was babysitting, sometimes it was a uniform that somebody needed for work, just small things. On average, $12,000 was the bridge financing required to get somebody back to work. And when you compare that, last week's StatsCan came out with the most recent costs of what it costs to incarcerate an individual: $287,000 a year for a female, $115,000 a year for a male. But when you compare that and stack that up to $12,000, there's a huge opportunity for us here.
There's a huge opportunity for savings.
Yeah.
Stacey said something earlier, Renze, that I think I want to pick up on, and that was about the perceptions of employers, of applicants who might have a criminal record. You hinted a little bit at this when you were commenting on the work that you had done with the Ontario 360, if I'm not mistaken, and that was, I guess, for lack of a better term, the public education aspect of this, just simply telling or educating, I suppose, employers or potential employers about this entire process and what is actually involved and what the risks actually are in perhaps hiring someone who has a criminal record. Can you comment a little bit more on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sorry,
Oh,
go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
No,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I'll start, and then
Yeah.
you
Sure.
can pick it up for sure. Apologies, I thought the question was coming to me, but I'll just add a couple points to that, and that is, and I think we need to think about education in a very broad sense. There's the direct education, and that governments, I think, can do, and that civil society organizations can do as well. So I'm thinking of institutions like John Howard Society or Elizabeth Fry Society, but governments too. Monty McNaughton, the former Minister of Labour in Ontario, has been doing, or was doing when he was minister, a very good job, and I know that's been continued by the Ontario government as well. Stacey mentioned the Skills Development Fund, which came out of that. I think it's important for politicians to use their pulpit, use their platform to convey some of these truths that are sometimes obscured. But I'm a policy guy, as well, and I think that policy can be an instrument of education as well. When I think about humanizing criminal records, for example, it's a policy, but it's a policy designed to educate. It's a policy designed to using the policy instrument of the criminal record to show that there is another side of the person. And that's that's a big task. I'm not gonna, it's a policy that would take a lot of steps, but there are simple things that can be done too. I think every time an employer requests a criminal record, they should, at the very least, get general information, receive a fact sheet about what it means to hire someone with a criminal record. What are some of the statistics? Just to de-exaggerate, if I can coin a phrase, de-exaggerate some of those fears. So those are just a couple things that come to mind. I think education has to take many different paths. But anyway, I'm sorry for interrupting. Stacey, if you have some, I'll let you comment on it now.
Yeah, no, that's good, Renze. That's exactly right. And the education piece is so important, because I think when we see, well, what would the process actually look like? Like, walk me through what the process might look like. It doesn't look like an employer taking anybody who shows up on their door. Of course not. But having a look at that additional information, Renze, that you're talking about, to say, okay, here's the things that contributed to the crime. So if there's addictions involved, okay, has there been any attempt or any resources allotted, and has the individual actually worked through the addiction process? There's a lot of things that that lead to crime. We've had individuals who I'll share a story of a woman that we dealt with, where she was released early she was released on her released on probation. So she wasn't just released, but she was released on probation. And she went to housing to see if she could get housing, because she wanted to get her children back. So housing told her, yes, you can get your children back, but as soon as you have your children, we'll give you housing. And then when she went and then it worked both in opposite ways. So she couldn't get the house because she didn't have the kids, and she couldn't get the kids because she didn't have the house. So the only way to bridge that, for her, in her erroneous thinking, was to go out to deal drugs and earn $1,500. Then she could have the down payment she needed. Then she could have the house. Then she could get the kids. She didn't even want to do the dealing, but that was the only thing. And I'm sitting here as an Ontario taxpayer and a Canadian taxpayer and thinking, wow, she went back for 7 years. We paid $1.4 million for the sake of $1,000 that this woman needed. And I think if employers could see some of that information and see some of that contextual stuff that somebody is actually working through, I mean, as an employer, I would take a bet on that.
Well, that's a powerful story, and it's also just an interesting it's an interesting anecdote about what happens sometimes when one government is working this way here and another way somewhere else, and the actual person gets caught in the middle.
Yeah.
Let me ask you both something. Maybe Stacey, we'll go to you first on this. There's a lot of talk in the news and in commentary these days about bail reform, and there is some concern about crime. And I'm not suggesting for a moment that the concern is misplaced, but there is a political aspect to all of this. So as you hear this conversation and you participate in it and you talk about these ideas and policies just in your own experience, do you think that there is a market for these ideas among our political leaders at various levels across the political spectrum, or maybe in some parts of it?
Absolutely. Bail reform, sentencing reform, these things are precursors to a lot of issues. And I think that there's a great opportunity in involving a number of stakeholders to have those discussions, and I highly support that that's necessary.
Renze, I wonder what you think. I mean, what the talk is about, sort of the very frontline concerns. You've discussed policies that could actually, where they implemented, potentially reduce those frontline concerns, because you're going to have less repeat crime. Do you have a sense at least that there is some potential for take up?
I certainly like to think so, and I do think so. I think I did work in politics for some time, and so I know that there are people, in our public institutions, I think that where this would resonate. I think that generally people of goodwill, I think, are interested in rectifying some of the ways in which our policies or our institutions don't properly reflect the human dignity. Now, I'm the first one to say that human dignity and justice are not always as simple on the ground as they are in theory. But that's why I think we need to look at we need to look at how justice impacts the individual, so. And in particular, when we're talking about people who have paid their debt to society, when we're talking about people who are legitimately trying to reestablish their lives in a way in concordance with the law, and having paid that debt to society, I think I don't know a political party or a politician who I think where they would say that this is not something that they would want to do. Like it's as I said before, I think it resonates with these core concepts and principles that animate us. Justice and mercy are supposed to go together, and forgiveness and true reconciliation. Now, reconciliation sometimes requires justice to be carried out, and that's an important part of our justice system. But at the end of that process of reconciliation, and I'm not suggesting that our justice system always does this very well, but at the end of that process of reconciliation, there has to be a way for people with human dignity to realize that. And it's true, there's discussion about bail reform and everything, and those are important discussions. I think these should go alongside. And I think that's one way of achieving both justice and mercy, is to say, yes, there needs to be true justice, but there also has to be mercy at the end of that process, and to recognize that these people are, at the end of this, they do become a vulnerable population where employment would benefit not just them, but society as a whole. So anyway, that's just a long way of saying I believe that this would resonate, and it ought to resonate, and I encourage people to take a look at this, because I think hopefully it speaks for itself.
Okay. Well, we are wow, we're just burning through the time. It always feels so fast when you're actually in the midst of the webinar, but we will be soon going to our Q&A time, and I'm pleased to see some questions coming in. You may have a question that has popped into your mind during the discussion. Don't be shy about it. Click that Q&A button and submit a question, and hopefully we'll have time to get to that question. In the meantime, I was a journalist once upon a time, so I live on questions still, and I've got plenty more of my own in the meantime. I want to ask this about how many people we think we could help through this. How many people are we talking about here that would be okay? I mean, I know we said off the top 4 million Canadians have a criminal record, but how many are we talking here that could, are potential fits for work and for participating in some of these ideas should they be implemented? Stacey, do you have some insight on that?
I have. I can answer the question, but I need to preface it first by saying that we have not studied this in a disciplined way with evidence-based results from a third party. So I want to preface it with that. But I will tell you that we took 400 applicants in the SDF program, that we were running at Prison Fellowship through our Bridge Care program. So that's the program to get to help people get reintegrated into society, and specifically to get them reconnected in employment. So of the 400 that we interviewed, we felt that there were 100 that could reasonably get a job, and of the 100, we were just under 50 that actually did.
Very interesting. Okay, so that's a
Yeah.
very,
So
very
that's our
practical.
experience. That's not a stat, but that was our experience.
Okay, Renze, where do you land on this?
That's good. That's a good question. I agree with Stacey that I don't know that we have we don't have great numbers, frankly, in terms of that the 4 million figure that you cited off the top is from a Public Safety Canada website, and there isn't always a lot of transparency into what's behind that. The RCMP has a database of people of criminal records, and it's not transparent, but I'm not suggesting it should be, because this is private information, and it should not be flowing out everywhere. But in terms of statistics, it'd be hard to say. I'm hopeful though, and I think going back to my presentation, regardless of how many people it is, we're not necessarily even talking about a lot of money. This is what Stacey was saying too. If a little bit of money can bridge people over into employment or housing, then I would say it's worth it. I think a lot of these policies are scalable too. So you start off small, and if it's highly successful, then you can build onto that and keep on going. That's especially true with the work bond policy that I proposed. Yeah, so it's I think in terms of the opportunity, not every one of those 4 million Canadians is necessarily going to be in the labor market, but many of them would be. So I think the better way to think about it is what is the ceiling here? What is the global population of people that this can touch? And that's a very high number. And as you cited at the beginning, it's in the millions. To put that in another perspective, that's 1 in 10 Canadians has a criminal record. That doesn't mean every single one of them is having a hard time in the job market. That's not necessarily the case, but a large proportion of them are. Or they might find that they're not able to rise quickly in the job market or rise to their full potential in the job market. So if you think about that, 1 in 10 people who could be seeking a job, 1 in 10 people walking along the streets, walking down the street, could potentially have a criminal record. So I think that's the perspective that we should be looking at this. It's a very high population that could be touched by these policies.
Okay. Let's open it up now to audience questions, and I have one question to ask you here. This comes from one of our audience members. How similarly or differently would the humanizing criminal records policy apply to Canadian youths in the justice system? So young offenders. That's the term for it.
Yeah, so that's an excellent precision, because I think, and it's connected as well with systems in our justice system that expunge records as well, because the worst thing in the world would be for an otherwise empty criminal record to come back. Because, so let me also clarify, for young offenders under the Youth Criminal Justice Act, these records are suppressed if the crime was committed before the age of 18. So the worst thing in the world would be, an otherwise empty criminal record comes up. Oh, but they had a work placement program, from Kingston Institution Penitentiary or something like that. Obviously, that is a system that there has to be safeguards built into this that would prevent any information at all from flowing if the criminal record has been suppressed for one reason or another. That said, I would say that in the case that there could be cases where a young offender, for example, it becomes known that they had been to prison, or it becomes known that through informally, not through formal mechanisms, but informally that they committed such and such a crime. There are other ways to get this information into the hands of employers. I would point, for example, to already it is possible, for example, to receive a reference letter from a correctional officer or for someone who is involved in skills training or work placement programs. There are my point in saying this is that I think there are other ways to address those offenders who would have their record suppressed for whatever reason. I hope that answers the question.
It does. It does. Stacey, is there a quick comment that you might have on this just before we go to the next question?
No, that's good. Yep.
Okay. Here's an interesting one, Renze, that picks up on something that you said earlier about the things like the family institution. Are parents in the home working? Do mothers get more or less dignity from work in the home as contrasted with work outside the home in contrast with fathers? How does the dignity of work look different basically when it comes to men and women? Or maybe it doesn't work. It doesn't look different.
Yeah, I think, and Stacey will have something to say about this because I've heard her talk about the state of family coming out of prison. But I'm going to just pick up on that too. I think that like I said, there is data to suggest to show that as important as having a job is, it is even more important to have a strong family life, to come from a stable home, but the reality is that's not always possible for some people, especially people who have been incarcerated for many years. You know, the relationships may have broken down. Relationships may just not be as strong as they were before they arrived, and maybe they weren't even very strong to begin with. So I appreciate where the question is coming from, which is to highlight that there is inherent dignity in our family life. The reality is it's not the case for everyone, and so, you know, I hope Stacey talks about three pillars that I think she's going to address, but where there isn't family, other things need to come in, and so maybe I'll pass it over to her for a comment on that.
No leading there whatsoever. So what Renze is referring to, and absolutely what we believe at Prison Fellowship, is that there are three pillars of stability that every individual coming back to the community needs, and that is that they need stable housing, they need stable employment, and they need stable community. And we think of it like a three-legged stool, and if any one of those stable pillars is dislodged or displaced, the stool is going to fall over. In other words, there's a greater likelihood of an individual going back to an incarceration context. So absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
So
Okay,
the family piece is it, or the community piece, because sometimes we have chosen families instead of having families by birth, but stable community, and hopefully in the form of a family.
Okay, we are quickly running out of time. I do want to get one more question in, and I do have also a comment from someone who's watching from the John Howard Society of Ontario. Big thumbs up to both of you, and a thank you for doing this informative presentation. So, kudos to you, Renze, and to Stacey. Very, very quickly, would either of you have any insight on this question? What's the wage gap, or is there a wage gap between people holding the same jobs, where one has a criminal record and one doesn't?
Yeah. So of course, on the record, that would be, of course, we wouldn't do that. That would be against, human dignity and all kinds of policies. But does it happen? Absolutely. In fact, I have an individual who works in my office who's very open about his past. And when I hired him, that was exactly the situation that was going on. It was known that he had a criminal record, and so the wage that he was being offered was significantly less than the going rate of anyone else that had that same position in the company. And I think the answer was, well, you can't get a job anywhere else anyways. And yeah,
Wow.
so it's an insightful question.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, it's an insightful question.
Great. But Renze, did you want to make a very quick comment?
Very, very quickly, I'd point people to Humanizing Criminal Records report. There is some data in there. This is what the wage question is one area where I think we don't have the best data in the world, but there are some Statistics Canada reports that try to address this. So if you take a look at some of them, the average annual earnings of someone with a criminal record is $14,000 now, which means that a lot of people are earning zero. And I'm just taking a look here. 41% of them report receiving income assistance as well. So it's not quite getting at the wage question, but it is getting at the income question. And like I said at the beginning, if you don't have an income, that's where the economic choice theory comes in and says, if you don't have an income through legitimate means, then the likelihood of you going to reoffend is higher.
All right. Well, Stacey Palmer, CEO and President of Prison Fellowship Canada, and Renze Nauta, Work and Economics Program Director at Cardus. Thank you to both of you immensely for your insights and your participation in all of this. It was great to have you here with us. I hope the audience enjoyed the show, and I'm very sorry that if we didn't get to your question. I do want to mention one more thing before we go. August 14th is when our next webinar, similar to this, is going to take place. It's called From Slippery Slope to Sheer Cliff, the impact of MAID in Canada. We're going to have invitations going out next week, but anyone who's participated in this webinar, you just got a sneak peek. So mark that down on your calendars for August 14th and expect an invitation in your inbox soon. Renze, Stacey, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for watching this webinar, and thank you to our sponsors who helped to make it happen. For Cardus, I'm Daniel Prusalidis. Bye-bye.